can begin. Got it. All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav asok b'divrei Torah. May we be moved by the wisdom of each of those who are here so that we can deepen our understanding of Torah. I'm going to share my screen and we'll jump right into can you see it, everybody?
Yeah.
I got to open all of you up so I can see all of you. All right. We are already moving very quickly through the book of Exodus. It's amazing to me how fast the year goes. Purim is around the corner, Pesach after that, and before you know it, we're going to be done with 2024. But let's live in this moment, which is Parshat Tetzaveh. So there are two Torah portions prior to Ki Tisa and two Torah portions after Ki Tisa. The last four portions of Exodus minus Ki Tisa that deal with the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Last week we began with Parshat Truma, the instructions and all the materials and the gifts that everybody gave. This week the focus is primarily on the priestly garments. Then next week is Ki Tisa, and then the last 2 weeks, Vayakel and Pikudei, are the actual building of, the construction of, and the completion of the tabernacle. So with this week's Torah portion, Tetzaveh, there are two verses that I have selected that I want to share with all of you in order to be able to look more closely at our own life. There's something fascinating about this week's Torah portion, Tetzaveh, and that is that it's the only Torah portion from his life, Exodus on, where he doesn't appear in it. His name doesn't appear. And the question that the rabbis ask is the question that I pose to all of us in the beginning. The fact that Moses' name does not appear in this parsha invites speculation. Was this intentional?
Yeah.
And if so, for what purpose? And was it directed at Moses that he's not there, or at the people? So that's the first question. And then we're going to jump into something that Moses actually does and look at leadership in general through the lens of the Torah portion and Moses. So first, the question, is it intentional and for what purpose? George, I see you're jumping a bit.
Several thoughts here. First of all, it's about the time that he died, around the 7th of Adar. And also he does not have the priest.
Wait, slow down. Slow down.
Near his date of death.
Meaning what?
He's gone. Okay. But the main thing
is... Wait. I just want to make sure that everybody understands you. So you're saying that it's purposeful that he's not in this Torah portion because he's going to die, and we want to be reminded that he's not here forever?
But the main reason is he's not the priest. He gives that over to his brother during this portion. So there's a transition.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is that Moses purposely took himself out so that there was an act of humility so that he could elevate his brother. Is that what you're saying?
That's what you're saying, but I'll agree.
Well, I just don't understand your comment. I mean, I'm trying to understand your comment. It's all about the priests, meaning what? So why can't Moses be there if it's all about the priests?
Because he isn't going to be the priest. He was leading, doing all this, and he's going to do it for 7 days while they're inaugurating his brother, but he's passing the torch.
And therefore, he shouldn't be in the parsha.
Well, I didn't say that, but I mean...
but that's my question.
That might be a hint that we're moving, in a direction.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so he's not in the parsha because it's a hint that we're moving from him to the leadership of the priests, which are going to involve his brother Aaron and that family. Thank you. All right, Jack, and then Eileen.
I had a question. He's not in the parsha, but how are the parshot divided? I mean, it's obviously intentional because it was divided this way. They could have made it longer to get his name in, or make another one shorter. So I guess the
Yes.
intent. I don't understand the question about intentionality. It's clearly intentional.
I agree with you. In other words, because it easily could have been in, when God created the Torah, or when, our ancestors put the Torah together, they could have done it in lots of ways where Moshe could have been included in this parsha. Dafka that he's not, I think, and I agree with Jack, is a message here. And it could be the message that George just offered, that because this is a Torah portion about priests, Moses is not in there to show the people that transition, or it could be out of his own humility that I'm stepping aside and letting my brother, which this Torah portion is focusing on, take center stage so that it doesn't have to be about me. Or, as George suggested, Moshe is going to be dying around this time, many years from now.
Yeah.
And therefore, there's a parsha that is close to his death where it doesn't have him in there to remind us that we can get by in this world even without Moshe. So any of those reasons, and I agree with Jack that it is probably intentional. Eileen.
I is this when he is giving the Ten Commandments?
No, that was 2 weeks ago when he gave the Ten Commandments, and he was very front and center in that week's Torah portion.
And his name is in there?
Yeah.
It's not. Then
Yeah.
I don't understand this other than it's either something that God wanted or something that whoever wrote the Torah decided to keep him out.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay,
It
well,
may have something to do with God, because he's only mentioned once in the Haggadah, I believe, on Passover.
and that's only in the English version. In the Hebrew version, there's not even really any mention of Moshe. And most people in that regard, Eileen, say, something similar, that the story, our focus shouldn't be around Moshe and what he did to allow the Israelites to leave Egypt, but it's really about God. And
Right.
therefore, that's why he's not in the Haggadah. Another act of humility and an act of, recognition of God versus human beings. So let's take a look at this, wonderful, oh, you can't take a look at it because I stopped my screen from sharing. So let me go back and share once more. Okay. So looking at the verse, Exodus 27:20, where it says, the very opening of our Torah portion, V'ata tetzaveh et bnei Yisrael v'ikhu elecha shemen zayit zach. You, again, this is God speaking to Moshe, but what would normally be here, Vayedaber Adonai Moshe Lemor, and God said to Moses, saying, that's the normal way in which the Torah communicates the conversation between God and Moses. Here, Dafka, it doesn't say that. It's not there. The Vayedaber Adonai Moshe Lemor isn't here. Instead, it just jumps right into the Atatitzavet b'nei Yisrael v'chu alecha. You shall instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling lamps regularly. So this screams out at students of Torah that it's such an unusual way of God communicating with Moses. And throughout the rest of the portion, there's no Vayedaber Adonai Moshe Lemor. And God said to Moses, saying, instruct the children of Israel, right? That style, that pattern, that structure doesn't exist here, which leaves our commentators to ask the question, why? What does it mean? Why the change? So Rabbi Tzvi Morgenstern offers the following. He says, Moses' name does not appear at all in this Parsha! Exclamation. Wow, holy moly.
Holy Moses.
Holy Moses.
Holy Moses, yes. In the previous Parsha were the instructions for the construction of the Mishkan. In this one are the directions to the individuals who were to do that work, each one according to the particular activity they were to do. In this light, we can understand that Moses was told, now you, ve'ata tetzaveh, meaning this is your job. Instruct, titzaveh, right? Command them, teach them, tell them. In the sense of tzavata, connection, the Israelites. Bind them with, or connect yourself to the Israelites. I'm going to go over that in a second as we finish reading. Ultimately, anyone who is bound and connected to Israel, so fully devoting themselves to the collective, erases their being, nullifies their sense of a separate self.
Ah.
That is what happened here. And that is why Moses is not mentioned separately as an individual.
Yeah.
This is such a profoundly magnificent text, but we need to clarify and understand it. So, the Torah, as I said, says, Ata titzaveh, you shall instruct or command. The Hebrew word titzaveh, what word is familiar to all of you in that Hebrew word? Titzaveh. Think about it for a second. What word
Tzitzit.
jumps out at you?
Tzitzis.
Tzitzit.
Tzitzit. Very nice. That's
Tzitzit.
one possibility. That's a certain, in the sound, tzitzit and titzaveh sound alike as an alliteration, but the root of the word is actually not tzitzit. What is the root of the word, George?
Well, of course, the noun is mitzvah, but let's vote. It's a piyut, which means to command.
Okay, so the root of the word is litzavot, which means to command.
Yeah.
The noun form that we're very familiar
Mitzvah. A mitzvah.
is mitzvah, as
Yeah.
in a commandment.
Yeah.
But what people don't realize is the core meaning of litzavot is not about command. It is to tie or bind together. It's to draw together. What does a mitzvah do? Literally, what does a mitzvah do? It draws closer you to either God or you to another human being. If you do the mitzvah of Bikor Cholim, what is Bikor Cholim?
Visiting the sick.
Visiting the sick, right? That draws you closer. That creates an attachment to you and the person that you are comforting. When you say a blessing, a bracha, before eating the meal, that is supposed to draw you closer to God, create an attachment between you and God. So a mitzvah, a commandment, the underlying idea behind commandment is connection, attachment, drawing us closer. So now, with that understanding, and that's what Rabbi Morgenstern is playing with. He's playing with the ideology of the word litzavot, to bind us together.
Mitzvot.
And what he's suggesting is when Moses is instructed, he's not really just being told by God to teach these people what to do. God is saying, Moses, become one with the children of Israel. Bind yourself wholly, physically, emotionally, spiritually with the children of Israel. So they are devoted to your vision which is God's vision of what should happen. And when you deeply connect, and I see your hand, Kathleen, and I'll call you in a second. when you bind yourself to another so deeply, you lose that sense of self. And I want to throw out one possible idea that to share as an example. You know, when a mother nurses her infant, is there a moment in that connection of nursing where the mother loses that sense of herself and is fully connected with the child in that moment of nursing? And even if there may be discomfort that the mother feels in some way, she lets go of that discomfort for the sake of nourishing her child. There is this fusion between the two of them. That, I think, is what is intended in what's going on here. Kathleen.
I really like that, but I think this kind of relates to it because God's been changing his relationship to the Israelite people. At first he did everything, and now he's having Moses tell them it's your turn to do things. And in a relationship, there are two parties, each has to make room for the other person. And so God has made room for us by giving us the world. He's giving us through the Mishkan the opportunity for us to do something for God. So we're making room for God as well by doing all this. And it has to be nullification of the person. You have to nullify part of yourself to make room for the other person in the relationship. God did it for us. Now we have to do it for him.
Beautiful.
And so Moses backs off so that the people can also do it.
Very nice. So there's actually a mystical concept that Kathleen is bringing, and that is tzimtzum.
Yes.
Tzimtzum.
Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is to nullify, to contract oneself in order to make space for another. And just as God does that to create the world and to create space for humanity, so Moses is doing that in this moment. And that's why his name isn't in the Parsha, because he has nullified a part of himself by fusing so closely with the people in order to give them the space to grow. Beautiful. Thank you, Kathleen. Is it Rob or Linda? Which one of you is?
It's Rob. I think this really follows with what we've been talking about, but I think that the what this commentary is doing is telling human beings that we need to sublimate our ego in order to fulfill the mitzvot. One of the definitions of ego is the sense of separateness that we have from God and from the body of mankind, humankind. And this Parsha and this commentary seems to say we need to push that away in order to be able to do the mitzvot that we need to do.
Rob, I wish I had had that comment before I recorded my little video for this coming Shabbat, because I think that would have added so beautifully to what I had, said in the video, which I've already given to Seth. So it's going out there. You make such an important comment, and that is, in order to serve another through the act of a mitzvah, or in order to serve God through the act of a mitzvah, I have to let go of some of me to be of service to another. Like when I go visit somebody in the hospital for Bikur Cholim, I have to give up some part of what else I might be doing with my time, because their need calls me and says, give up, Richard, what you could be doing right now, because it's more important to be of service to the other person. And that process is, as you said, sublimating my own ego for the sake of another. Or if I make a decision to pray, every morning, the service, I have to do the same thing in my relationship to God. There's a lot of things I could be doing instead of going, and praying. And so I have to let go of some of my own ego to make space for me to engage in this relationship with God. That is so spot on. Judy and then Lauren.
I don't think you're really nullifying yourself, because when you give to somebody, you also get so much. And like when you're visiting the sick, when I was a rape crisis advocate, I think I got more than I actually gave. And when a mother is nursing her baby and the hormones are released and the love you feel and everything, you're getting probably more than you feel you're giving.
So thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad you added that, Judy. And perhaps that is the very intention of the word litzavot, because litzavot isn't negating, it's attaching, it's drawing even closer, it's making a deeper connection. When I do for somebody else, they feel it, and therefore I feel it. Their response encourages even more of my response, and it's a mutuality that goes on there. Excellent, 100%. And so therefore the intention here is not that Moses is disappearing, that Moses and the people are drawing even closer to each other. There's a deepening of that connection and that relationship, and a sense of need for each other in this relationship for it to work. Great. Another beautiful way of framing it. Lauren.
Like I was thinking, it's allowing them to do things for themselves, which is very difficult as a parent, allowing your child to do things on their own. I was thinking that, when you teach your child how to drive, and the first time they get their driver's license and they drive up down the street by themselves, you want to jump in the back seat and be with, it's allowing your ego to go to allow them to stand on their own 2 feet. And that's very difficult as a parent, to allow your children to become adults on their own.
My God, that is so important, Lauren. Yes, what a great addition. I'm thinking when you said driving, I was thinking when a child learns to ride a bike.
Oh, that's
at some point you have to let go
right.
of the bike.
Right.
Or when a child is learning to walk, what do? We take steps backwards away from them, removing ourselves in order to let them learn. And even if they fall, we let them fall, right?
Right.
So they can learn to pick themselves up again. We don't reach out and grab them and stop them from falling. That would be such a disservice to allowing our children to grow. So what Lauren is here framing is that in Moshe giving instruction, Moshe is giving them, the children of Israel, the opportunity to find their own voice, their own independence, their own relationship to God, as opposed to being wholly bound by Moses as the intermediary between God and the children of Israel. Great. Love it. Love it. Such very thoughtful comments by all of you. Any other ways of understanding this passage by Rabbi Morgenstern? Okay, let's on. So let's take a look at how Rabbi Slater, Jonathan Slater, frames it. He uses this idea of nullification. The process of nullification here is not one of egolessness per se, but of intimacy, connection, and mutuality. Right? The process of nullification here is not one of egolessness, but one of intimacy, connection, and mutuality. What do you think he means by that? And more specifically, if you see, I added the question can this apply to parenting? Like when we think about what Lauren was just saying, but even the way that Rob and Judy also just framed it, right? How do you live in relationship to another in a way that builds intimacy, connection, and mutuality? How does that happen? What do you have to do? How do you have to engage with another to create the proper both space and attachment all at the same time? Judy.
For one thing, you don't try to fix them, and you let them grow on their own. And I
Is
think
that easy? Is that easy to do for those of you who have ever been parents?
Oh, yeah.
Is it easy to let go and not try to fix? Yes, it's not easy at all. But I agree, that is a huge, important step. Other thoughts?
any relationship.
For sure, for sure. Nancy.
You have to be like-minded to start out. You have to have common interests as the other person, have something in common to start out.
Good. But what happens, Nancy, if you don't have things that are in common with one another to start out? Can you still build intimacy, connection, and mutuality?
Maybe eventually, if there's something that comes up, I don't know the answer to that, but you just try to find something, I guess, or I don't know, like at the temple, you have a common interest to start. And then, your individual likes and dislike come up later, I guess.
Yeah. Well, minimally, it could be, I may not understand you, I may not have common interests, but you're another human being and you have a right to your views, and I want to learn from you. Even if it doesn't change me, I want to understand you more deeply.
You always have to have find or listen to another person's opinion about something in order to learn.
For sure. Right. What makes great leaders? Because I think underlying all of what Rabbi Morgenstern is saying is that Moses is employing a quality of leadership to deepen the relationship between him and the Israelite nation. The way that Moses is behaving is he's behaving as in the proper manner of leadership. And so what is that proper manner of leadership here? And how do you apply that in your own life, in your relationships? Yeah, Kathleen.
I think part of it is having faith in the other person and allowing them to do and be and contribute and be a part of it, not taking the credit, but promoting their growth, which is kind of what his pulling back did, because they got to do more.
Right. Having faith in the other that they can achieve and accomplish without overmanaging, micromanaging, being on top. Think about in your own world of employment, if you ever had to work for another person, and think about the boss that was constantly micromanaging you and on top of every single decision that you made, questioning everything that you did, versus the boss who trusted and allowed you to make mistakes, to grow, to move your job in a different direction based on your own intuition, insights, and feeling for your expertise. Right? And think about the difference between working for those two types of people. Right? That I think is what Kathleen is suggesting here. Lauren.
I was just going to say that as someone who taught for 37 years and taught under many different principals, the principals who got the most from their faculty were the ones who took the strengths of their teachers and worked with them and praised them as opposed to those who were afraid of their faculty and micromanage them. And nobody wants to be criticized every single minute. So a classroom is
No,
like a
I
little,
do. I like to be
do you?
criticized.
Yeah. So a classroom is like a little, its own little business. And a teacher runs their own little room. It's very nice to be praised. It's very nice for a principal to come in and tell you and stand up for their teacher. Now, certainly not every teacher some teachers didn't do what they were supposed to be doing, but the principals who made us feel like we were part of the team as opposed to they were the captain in control were the ones who got the most out of their staff. And
very nice, Lauren. And in fact, I think what he's saying here is in the beginning where it says, in this one are the directions of the individuals who are to do that work, each one according to their particular activity they were to do. In other words, Moses is doing what you just said, entrusting the actual work of the building of the tabernacle to the people and stepping back, saying, right, I know you can do it. And then letting them do it on their own without having to micromanage. Steve and then George.
This discussion reminded me of the New York Times. Today's New York Times has a front page article entitled "Where Hostages' Loved Ones Gather for Solace," and it starts with a story of a Israeli whose family were taken by Hamas as hostages, and he planted himself outside of IDF headquarters, vowing not to leave until his family was released. And he was, and to quote from the article, passers-by stopped to commiserate with him and tried to lift his spirits. And homeowners nearby gave him a place to wash up and rest so that he could continue this stand for his family. It relates somewhat to what we're discussing. It's today's New York Times.
No, I think it does relate, Steve. I think it speaks to the notion of leadership is about embedding yourself with the people in a way that transforms the relationship and presents a message of who you are relative to who you want them to ultimately grow into being, for sure. George.
Yeah, okay. I have a doctorate in management theory, and they're always trying to find the perfect management style. Now, okay, I'll agree that what Moses did, as a religious leader and the leader of the Jews, was what he should have done. But we're looking for, what's a good management style? I mean, a lot of you know about basketball. You had John Wooden, who was a perfect gentleman, and you had Bobby Knight, who was swearing, throwing chairs, and screaming, and they both won. They both got results. So it's not that simple. If you follow ABC, you're going to be a great manager. I mean,
I think what you're saying is really important, George. There's not one way to be a leader.
Yeah.
There are multiple ways,
Yeah.
and you have to pick the path that also is reflective of who you are as a human being. And Moshe, that's why, by the way, what George just said is important for us to hold on to, in the sense that there are, 3 leaders that the Torah sees guiding the children of Israel once they leave Egypt, maybe even 4.
Okay.
There is Moshe, there's Aaron, there's Joshua, and there's Miriam. And all 4 have a very different style and approach to leadership. And one way does not work for everybody. But we're just learning Moshe's way here in this week's Torah portion. Kathleen. And then after Kathleen, we're going to move on to the second verse that I want to share with you.
Well, I think one of the things about it is the styles are meshing, because you have one kind of leader in Moses, but you have a different kind where I think Aaron was considered more of a peacemaker and more understanding of the people, whereas Moses was more into laws. And when you have, you need a mesh of different styles of leadership wherever you're at. So I think it's important that you have all these different types.
Exactly.
Balance it.
Exactly. One type of leader may be appropriate for a certain moment.
Right.
And another style of leadership may be important for a completely different moment. For sure. For sure. You know, she was the right person for the job at the right time is the language that we hear. Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, I was going to say when you said that, the perfect example is Winston Churchill, who was a perfect leader for wartime, and he was not a good leader once in peacetime. So that I think that fits what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's jump to a different verse. Thank you all for such a rich discussion on this one. From a little later on in the Torah portion. This deals with the priestly garments in particular, and we know that there was this breastplate, this choshen, that the high priest would wear, and all of the stones of the 12 tribes were on this breastplate, along with the Urim and Tumim, which are concepts that we don't really know exactly what the Urim and the Tumim were. We could only, you know, try to gain wisdom based upon other passages in the Torah of what was really going on. So this is this section. V'natata el choshen hamishpat et ha'urim ve'et ha'tumim. Inside this breastplate of decision, you shall place the Urim and the Tumim, so that they are over Aaron's heart when he comes before God. Thus, Aaron shall carry the instrument of decision for the Israelites over the heart before God at all times. So that's the verse in the Torah. This Choshen HaMishpat, this breastplate, is not just a breastplate, but it relates to Aaron's role in decision-making in relationship to the children of Israel. How do the Urim and the Tumim help in that decision-making process? That's what's left unclear. So, in this passage from Ma'anash Shel Torah, he suggests the following. Why were these things called the Urim and the Tumim? Urim, because they illuminated their words. What does that mean? Urim from what word? Or, exactly, light. So Urim, because they illuminated their words. Whose words did they illuminate?
Hashem's.
Well, then why would it say they?
Oh.
Why would it be their words?
Oh, okay.
Right? If it's their words, it's either the words of the priests or the words of the people, to be determined. Tumim, why is it tumim? Because they fulfill their words. From the Hebrew word tam, which means complete. So they're called Urim and Tumim because they have to do with illuminating and completing. Well, we're going to have to go a little bit further. Many have had difficulty understanding how the Urim and the Tumim functioned and how they were used. And the explanations of the biblical commentators vary. The Ramban, Nachmanides, 14th century, he offered an explanation that seems to make sense. And it is also in line with that of Rashi. Ramban suggests that on the breastplate were inscribed the names of the tribes, and inside the folds of the breastplate rested the Urim and the Tumim, on which were written God's full name, a secret that was given to Moses directly from the Holy One. God inscribed them, these names, so that they were the product of divine effort. Now, perhaps the secret of the writing of divine names was passed down from person to person among the great ones of Israel, and this would explain why it was that David had an ephod. He also had this kind of breastplate that he wore. So this is how it worked. a portion of these divine names were called Urim, and a portion were called Tumim. When the priest would inquire of the Urim and the Tumim, he would first direct his intention to those names that were connected to the Urim. And these names would then illuminate particular letters on the stones of the breastplate. The letters were at this point a random selection of figures without an order or meaning. They could be combined to create various words and sentences. So it's almost like it's magical. You know those electronic games that have lights and they pop up all different kinds of letters?
Mhm.
So that, in a sense, is what he's describing. The stones, the Hebrew names of God, the letters would light up, and then the priest would have to take those letters that were illuminated and figure out what the message was. Did any of you ever play with a Ouija board as a kid? And you would move the Ouija board around and it would go to different letters, and then you'd have to figure out what those letters would spell and what they meant. That's what's being described here in the function of the Urim, some mystical, magical event. Jack.
I guess I'm having I don't believe any of this.
Oh,
I'm not, I guess I'm not sure. I mean, I guess at one level it's in the Torah, so there's lots of people over the centuries who have been trying to figure out what the heck it means. I guess I don't see the relevance to me of this, and I guess more concerning to me is the I guess I don't know what this means and why I should care about this and why how this relates to me at all.
I'm so glad you asked that question. I am just so delighted that you asked that question because it's so true. It makes no sense. And yet, if you hold on for a couple more minutes as we get to the end, you will see, especially the way that Rabbi Slater frames it here, how it makes sense. So I'm glad you asked, and
I have a
give me
question.
three more minutes. Yeah, Eileen.
Only 3 more minutes. I don't understand what the names are that are illuminated or what they are.
Each of the names, God's different names. You know how there's lots of names of God, Adonai and Elohim.
I don't think there are that many as the names of the tribes.
There's,
And if each
according
stone
to
is
our
supposed,
tradition, 70 different names of God.
good Lord.
Yes, that's one of them. Good Lord. That's
So
one of them. Kathleen and then Judy.
Okay, you know what I was thinking? I was thinking this is God's metaphor for telling us how to make decisions when we have multiple interests. Because God said, keep the 12 tribes' names on the thing, because each tribe has different talents, different skills. God's name is on the inside because when we're making a decision, if this is an instrument of decision, when we're making a decision, we have to consider God's laws and principles overall. At the same time, we're considering the diversity of interests, and we have to show equity for all of that. It's an inclusionary kind of thing. That's what I think the relevance is for us today.
Wow. What do you think, Jack?
Good.
That's beautiful. I guess I have a problem with the appearance of kind of magic and illumination, and I understand what Kathleen's saying, and I guess that is Kathleen or Kathleen, are you simply disregarding kind of the plain text or the plain text where it's talking about illumination and things like that and saying, well, that doesn't matter. Look at the bigger picture here.
Remember, Jack, but before you answer, Kathleen, this is a commentary. The plain text, all it says is inside the breastplate of decision, you shall place the Urim and the Tumim. we don't know that in the Torah text itself there was any magic, although we have to assume that there was some kind of power to these things. It's Rambam who is describing this very esoteric, mystical, magical kind of thing, because he's trying to make sense of what was happening. And then it's Kathleen who's reinterpreting Rambam's mystical into a very practical understanding of how we come up with our own needs to make decisions in fair and equitable ways. Kathleen, in response to Jack, yeah.
Yeah, I think God speaks to people in the way that they understand. And if people were thinking of it as magical, that was part of the tradition, and maybe there were superstitions. But I think it is magical and very powerful, much more powerful. And it's so powerful, it seems like magic if you put God's law up here and you have to really figure out how do we unite all of these diverse interests. I mean, that is an issue we struggle with to get today, and yet it is such a powerful concept to do. So in that sense, doing that in and of itself seems like a miracle. So that's my response.
Beautiful, beautiful. Anita.
There are symbols of leadership, and I'm thinking of things like a king has a scepter. There's rings, there's various objects. So this is the way, and this is an object that the Jewish leader, the Jewish religious leader, the Kohanim, would have to set them up as the person. And the interesting part to me is that it had the 12 symbols of the tribes. So it wasn't just a piece of gold, it was something to unite 12 groups of people who are now such distant relatives that, you know, they may not really remember that they're relatives of each other. So it's a unifying thing for the peoples. And then because it has the names of God encased in it, it's the unification of the people with God.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Something that I think we tend to forget today because of the diversity and the divergent of opinions and ways to understand God's word, we tend to look at another and remove them from the totality of the picture. And here, when you have the Urim and the Tumim and all of the stones together, you're saying that forces us, even in the diversity of opinions, we're all still bound together in a unified front. Very nice.
I love it, and it's a reminder all the time, because we don't do well without the reminders.
For sure. Well, let's jump in. Let's try to finish this, and then, okay. So I said, therefore the priest would then direct his attention. Here's where I'm starting again. Therefore, the priest would then direct his attention to the holy names of the Tumim, and thereby fulfill his understanding of the intention of the letters. They would be illuminated before his eyes, so that he understood how they should be combined to make a meaning. This is one degree of all the degrees of the Holy Spirit. So again, as Jack said, this seems a little bit woo-woo. You know, that letters are going to pop up in different lights, and the priest is going to be able to figure out what's the hidden message behind all of those. Yeah, feels
It's
a
like
little
a code for spies.
Exactly.
It's just like a code for spies. They have
Exactly.
to.
So let's keep going a little bit. It is in the light of the Ramban and the Gaon Eliezer of Vilna, the Vilna Gaon, who explains the interaction between the priest Eli and Hannah. Do you remember the story where when Eli saw only her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard, he thought she was drunk. And it's in response to this that Hannah responded, "No, my Lord, I'm a woman with a bitter spirit." Remember, she can't give birth to a child. She said to him, "You are not a master in this regard." Meaning, what is she saying? You don't know what's going on with me. You assume, you're making an assumption that because I'm mouthing words, I'm drunk. But you don't know what's really going on inside of me because you don't have the Ruach HaKodesh. The Ruach HaKodesh does not dwell in you if you suspect me in this manner. Further, regarding the phrase, "I am a woman with a bitter spirit," the Midrash teaches, Rab Haggai said in the name of Rabbi Yitzhak, "I am one of those who have difficulty receiving gifts, like Sarah and her companions." So taken together, this is the explanation. The priest Eli sensed that Hannah's prayer was out of the ordinary. He immediately inquired of the Urim and Tumim. He saw that the illuminated letters, He, Kaf, Resh, Shin, and he was convinced they spelled Shchura, drunk. It is in this response to this that Hannah said, "No, my Lord, Ruach HaKodesh does not dwell in you. I am a woman of bitter spirit." In other words, the true order of the letters is Kaf, Shin, Resh, He. Not Shchura, but Kshara, proper, decent. I am a decent woman. So the same letters popped up with Eli. He put them together and believed one thing. She said, "You misread the Urim and the Tumim. You put the letters together in the wrong way. And this is really what's going on." So that's the story. So what do we do with that? Well, here comes Rabbi Slater. He says, the Urim and the Tumim, mystical and cryptic as they are, invite speculation. This explanation is rich in possibilities. As a mindfulness teaching, it is a reminder that what appears at first glance to be the truth is often not so. Right? Eli the priest was certain when he saw Hannah behaving the way she was behaving, that he knew what was going on with her. And I would imagine that each one of us finds ourselves in circumstances sometimes where we assume something is happening and it's not. Where we assume we understand what somebody is saying and we don't. Yes? Is there familiarity with that? Kathleen?
I think the mistake in it is that the assumption was assuming the worst, and God wants us to assume the best first. And that with Hannah, the priest assumed the worst first. And I think that's a lesson for, that was they brought in the Urim and the Tumim in that because it's supposed to be from God, and with God we want to assume the best first. We want to approach it in a positive.
For sure. For each one of us, absolutely. As he continues, while we may not have a device that reveals divine letters and then how they should be read. So Jack, there's, the realization that, come on, we don't live with a reality of Urim and Tumim. We still have the two steps of this process that are available to us. That is, our eyes and our hearts and our minds are drawn to something. We see it the way the Urim enlightened, illuminated the letters. We can still see and experience our first reaction. Then we read the situation. We put all those letters together after they've been illuminated, and we think we know what it is, what it means. Right? The way that Eli was certain that he could put the letters together and he knew what was going on with Hannah. This first illumination is when we stop ourselves from taking that reaction and assessment to be true, to encompass all of what is happening in this moment. And then having paused for this enlightenment, we are then better able to be a more pure or fulfilling reading of the situation. We're open to a more pure and fulfilling reading of the situation, one that rearranges the components of the scene, moves the center of awareness from our self-centeredness, our ego, to a more complete or encompassing understanding of the unfolding events. Mindful awareness prepares us for Ruach HaKodesh. So, in a nutshell, what is he saying? The Urim and the Tumim, however they worked back in the day, are nothing more than a symbol for us to say that when we encounter a situation, the first thing that we need to do is see what's going on. See all the letters. Understand. Then what we need to do is make sure our interpretation of what we're seeing is actually what's happening. And we have to be very slow in jumping to conclusions so we do not misread a situation. And therefore, the questions that I pose, right? How do you, each one of you individually, read a situation? Are you quick to judgment? Are you slow to judgment? Are you quick to assuming? Are you slower to assuming? What are the cues that you use to assess what is happening? And what are the dynamics that exist amongst people? And how at times have you misread a situation? And then what did you do to rectify that situation? So I do think there is, even if the Urim and the Tumim, don't exist today, to Jack's earlier comment, the process of understanding how they might have worked leads us to a deepening of our own ways in which we engage people and how we should engage people, to not jump to conclusions and judgments and assumptions, and be very, very slow and clear in taking as much information as we can before we make an assessment. Judy.
I think that also includes judging yourself.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. It's so true. We are our worst own enemies when it comes to self-judgment, and therefore we should pause and reread all the letters before we jump to make decisions about ourselves. Nice. All right. Leadership is the first text that we looked at. How we interact with other people is the second. I think both of them combine really and teach us the same lessons about how we need to be in relationship with other people. Hopefully, removing our ego so that we can better understand, lead, hear, and respect those who we come in contact with. That really is, I think, the message of the Torah portion. So a good week to you all. Wishing all of you a
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.
And
Shabbat Shalom.
we'll look
Bye.
forward to the next time we gather together.
Shabbat Shalom.